guys, really quickly before I get into the stories. It would really mean a lot to me if you hit that like button and dropped a comment below. For some reason this helps with the algorithm when it comes to YouTube and suggesting my channel, so if you would, it would mean a lot to me. Also, if for some reason you're not subscribed and you're new here, please subscribe. That also would help me a lot tremendously, so thank you, and let's get into the stories. Trucker here. I think the best creepy thing that has ever happened to me was when I was heading from Tucson, Arizona up to Salt Lake City, Utah. This was a few years ago, and the main highway had been taken out in a flash flood. It was under construction, so I had to take a weird detour through the mountains in lower Utah. It was getting late, and I was getting pretty tired, so I pulled off onto the shoulder and went to sleep in my bunk. Now this was the middle of nowhere. Closest town was maybe 40 miles away, so it's completely pitch black outside once I turn the lights off. Around 4 a.m., I wake up because I'm hearing something messing with my truck, like playing with the air and power cables between the cab and the trailer, which is literally 6 inches from where my head is at, but on the outside of the cab. Then I feel something climb onto the landing that's on the back of my truck, and it shakes my whole truck. So I'm guessing something at least around 200 to 300 pounds was climbing around back there. I'm thinking maybe a mountain lion or a bear. At this point, I'm wide the F awake, and I want to get this thing away from me. So I slam my hand into the cab wall, trying to scare whatever it is out there. I slam really hard enough to make it a really loud sound. Then I hear someone, a male, scream bloody murder, and I hear them fall off the back of my truck. I then hear about 15 other people all around my truck yelling. I climb up front, turn on my lights, and illuminate a squad of Army reserves doing their midnight ruck march and capture drills. Turns out these guys were supposed to go find an abandoned truck and secure it for their midnight drills. The actual truck was 3 miles back down the road. They were not expecting me to be sleeping there, and they thought it was part of the drill. I'm ex-military, so after explaining I was not part of their test and legit was just out there out of coincidence, and we all laugh it off. They had to radio to their CO and tell him that I was out there and not to have any of the other squads bother me. Parked off an exit ramp at around 3 a.m. for my 10 hour. The moon was full and high. I then spotted an unmistakably human figure out in a nearby cut cornfield. A little spooky, but I just wrote it off as an old timer, maybe putting up a scarecrow for the grandkids. I started watching a few YouTube videos before turning in. And then, out of the corner of my vision, could have swear I saw movement. I then shut my lights off to get a good look. Saw the figure but nothing else. But I also couldn't 100% be sure. But it maybe looked like it was in a different spot. Maybe even a little closer. Now I was definitely feeling a bit spooked. The highway was devoid of anyone else besides a car passing every 10 minutes or so. I really didn't want to, but I had to jump out and pee. I considered finding a bottle, but I told myself I was just being childish. I took a look at the figure again, and it was right where I figured it should be. So I hop out, walk between my truck and the trailer, and start to take the leak. Every fiber of my being wanted to look, but again, I told myself I was just being foolish. Not much longer, I couldn't help it, I looked. The field was now completely empty and the figure wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I pinched off and jumped back in and took off down the highway. I did not give one shit about violation. I stopped 40 minutes up the road at a well-lit and very full Love's gas station. I haven't stopped on a ramp since. I posted this somewhere else recently, but it fits better here. I used to deliver hot shot freight across the Great Plains, Minnesota area. One night around 2 a.m., I was hauling across North Dakota trying to reach Montana by morning. I was delivering a particularly valuable tractor part that a farm desperately needed for the following day. I began to notice some highway hypnosis sneaking up on me. But it didn't really bother me because I'd been through it hundreds and hundreds of times before. Anyone who has driven across North Dakota knows that it is incredibly flat, like really flat. There also tends to be very straight and long roads. It's somewhat easy to see things on the road that are far away, even at night. I noticed something long on the road, spanning my entire lane, approximately half a mile in front of me. I slowed down a little and prepared to move into the opposite lane, thinking it was some tread off a blown tire or something. As I got closer, I noticed it was two people laying head to toe across the entire lane. I swerved into the other lane, successfully avoiding them, and came to an almost complete stop. But they didn't move, not 1 inch. I was just about to back up and check up on them when I remembered a story that an old graybeard colleague of mine had told me. He told me that in certain remote areas, people will lie down in the middle of the road and wait for a car or truck to stop and see what's going on. At that point, the road layers, along with whoever else is hiding in the nearby bushes, will beat the shit out of the driver and steal his vehicle, leaving him in the middle of nowhere. I decided not to back up, and when the two people in the road saw me put my truck back in gear and drive away, they both got up and walked back towards the shoulder of the road. I called the police and explained what had happened. We were so far away from civilization, but I doubt anything came of it. Thanks to that old graybeard, I got to keep my truck, my job, and my teeth. Okay, I got one. And it was while I was actually driving a bus which was made out of a truck in the deserts of Central Australia. I was over 500 kilometers from the nearest town, so yeah, middle of nowhere stuff. I was out on a 5-day charter to pick up a bunch of Aboriginal elder women to go and get their women's business health checks done. On the day I took them to get that done, we went to a place called Mintabi, so they could shop in the clothing and whatever store that's randomly in this little opal mining area of South Australia. We left from there quite late to make the 3 or so hour journey back to where they were all staying overnight. The next day I'd take them back to their respective desert communities. The passengers all fell asleep as they'd had a very long day. Even the nurse who was traveling with us fell asleep. So then there's me, all alone in the cab of the Mercedes truck. All 30 passengers were all sleeping in the darkness of the passenger pod behind the cab, and it was around 9 p.m. Up ahead in the distance, I can see a headlight coming towards me, along the lonely desert dirt road. So I dip my lights so they spot the lights go off, and adjust to see only what a low beam will show me. I drive down into a slight dip of a dry creek bed, expecting to see the car with only one headlight anytime shortly. It's not unusual to see a car with only one headlight out there, so I'm not even remotely bothered. As I come out of that dip, I put my spotlights on and high beams back on, and there's no car, no nothing, just an empty dirt road. There's no dust in the air, so I can see a good distance in front of me and out to each side. I'm telling you, there was nothing there, just empty desert, the dirt road, and me alone in the cab. I keep the lights on until we come to a stop about an hour later. I didn't see any cars or anything the rest of that journey. Before I let the passengers out, I asked if any of them saw that light, and they all go dead silent, and after a short while, they all start talking in their own language, hurriedly, and then they all got off the bus. A few moments later, a couple of ladies come up to me and ask me to tell them exactly what I saw, without leaving anything out, and to describe exactly where I saw it. Now I'm a pretty big guy. I've lived on 3 continents. I've been a police officer, a teacher, a bus and coach, now a truck driver, all sorts of things. Let's just say I'm pretty skeptical, but I do have an open mind. There's not much in this world that scares me. After I told these ladies everything from start to finish, and described in minute detail exactly where it happened, I took note of exactly how far out we were and when it happened. The 2 ladies looked at me with the whites showing in their eyes. They looked spooked, terrified. And they said, and I'll never forget the way they said it,
Driver, we are so lucky that you did not stop, because if you did, no one would have seen us, any of us, ever again. We'd all be gone.
I asked why, and they shook their heads and said not to talk about it, because it had scared all the ladies. I'm sure many of you and many people have heard about the Min lights in Western Queensland. Well, whatever these ladies knew about whatever I saw in our location, they were convinced that it wasn't something you wanted to meet in the desert at night. I only ever saw this once, and I only saw it for maybe a minute, and it looked to me like a car headlight a couple of kilometers away up the road. But I'll tell you what, if the ladies that come from this area and whose people have survived in this desolate, remote part of the continent for 60,000 years are worried, to the point of all being scared, then I certainly don't want to mess with whatever the hell that was. Around 2006-ish, I was driving a flatbed, picked up a load of construction material, some drywall, roofing, don't remember exactly, but it was prepackaged in boxes, and I remember having to use the strap protectors on the load. I was in rural Tennessee. The memory is foggy now, but I want to say it's between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of Missouri, Alabama, and Tennessee state lines. Tarp required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere woods, on a 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp is flapping in the wind. I find a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I just did a shitty job tarping this load and decided to redo the entire thing on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the load, and start unrolling the tarps again. And I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it, other than to just keep my eye on him because we're in the middle of nowhere, and continue with what I'm doing. About the time I have the tarp set in place and I'm climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this dude is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working just in case. It's an 8-pound solid metal bar about 4 foot long, tapered to a blunt point on one end and hollow on the other. It's used for tightening straps and chains, etc. The guy gets to me, and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy. Like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process and said, "F it, good enough to party." The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. Like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up, if you know what I mean. Clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with dirty white tennis shoes, because I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me and waits until I acknowledge him and just says,
"I've got a long walk."
I'm like, "Yeah man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere," making it clear there's no ride to be had here. He nods and starts walking by me, continuing on his way. Stops at about the driver door on my truck and turns around. Comes back to me and repeats himself.
"I've got a long walk."
At this point, I explained that I cannot give him a ride, insurance and all that. Apologize for not being able to help him out. He seems to accept this, turns around and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him and he is moving away from me. As I'm putting the last of the bungee straps over, I look to check where he's at. He's now turned around and heading back towards me once more, now only about 100 yards in front of my truck and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone. He has his hands up to his face and I can barely make out his mouth moving, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with the straps, grab my winch bar, and climb back into my truck, as he's only about 10 yards away now. As soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors and set the winch bar to the passenger seat, just in case. I look at the guy and realize he's not talking on a phone. He's talking to his hand, and now I'm really nervous, because he doesn't look like he's having a pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. I crank the truck up, put it in gear, and just pull out. Didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just staring at me, holding his hand to his face with this dead-ass look on his face, just staring. Gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror and no one there. I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done that route enough to know where these massive dirt areas every 40 or so miles were, where you could park safely away from the road itself. I decided to call it a night, closed my blinds, and laid down to watch something on my phone. After roughly an hour, I hear someone trying to open the driver's side door. I haven't heard any vehicles on the road the whole time. I parked, but I get up to peek out the curtains. As I look out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I hear them now trying to open the passenger side door. I peek down from the top of the curtain but can't see anything, so I start the truck and kick on the lights. I'm fairly freaked out at this point, so I'm still not opening the curtains but peeking through the gaps. Nothing. Nobody is standing on either of my doors or parked within sightline. I take a deep breath and close the sleeper curtains too. Because for some reason, that's gonna make things better, right? After laying down and convincing myself that something blew against the truck, and it only sounded like the doors, I hear what sounds like someone trying to pry open the vents on the sleeper. The door handles start clicking again, and the truck starts shifting like someone is climbing on it. I hit the little alarm button in the sleeper, hoping to spook them off, but it does absolutely nothing but add to the noise of the door handles, fingers tapping on the windows and chassis, and the hiss of air coming out of the suspension. Then suddenly it stops. A few moments where I can only hear myself breathing and my heart pounding before I hear another truck approach and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever it was to come back, but it never did. In the morning, I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck. But on every window were tiny human-looking handprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and then stuck it to my window over and over. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, feel free to hit that like button and the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. Hey guys, I'm gonna make this one quick because, well, I restarted Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'm really wanting to go ride my horsey a little bit and shoot me some O'Driscolls, so you'll have to pardon me and understand, ma'am and sirs, that, well, there's trouble in Valentine and I gots to be getting over there. We'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers. You're alright, boy. Sorry, if you know, you know.